Imagine being trapped in the middle of the ocean. No land in sight, no food, no water. Just endless waves stretching to the horizon. The scorching sun burns your skin by day, and the freezing winds chill your bones by night. Every passing second, the ocean threatens to swallow you whole. Yet some have defied the odds, surviving weeks, sometimes even months, lost at sea. But how did they do it? Stay with us as we count down the most jaw-dropping, mind-bending survival stories of people who faced the unforgiving sea and lived to tell the tale. Number 10. The man who drank turtle blood to stay alive. In 2012, a fisherman named Toakai Teitoi from Kiribati set out on what was supposed to be a short fishing trip. But fate had other plans. His boat ran out of fuel, leaving him and his brother-in-law stranded in the Pacific. Days turned into weeks. Dehydration loomed, hunger gnawed at their stomachs, and the blazing sun scorched their skin. His brother-in-law succumbed to thirst, but Teitoi refused to give in. His secret weapon? Drinking the blood of sea turtles. Yes, you heard that right. Without fresh water, he resorted to the grisly yet life-saving act of cutting open turtles and drinking their blood for hydration. Then, just when he thought all hope was lost, a miraculous event occurred. A storm erupted, bringing life-saving rainwater. But the real twist? A rescue ship passed him by, only to return hours later, as if fate itself had decided he was meant to survive. Could you drink turtle blood to stay alive? Number 9. The castaway who lived off raw fish and rainwater. José Salvador Alvarenga, a Mexican fisherman, holds one of the most shocking records of all time, 438 days adrift at sea. He set out on a simple 2-day fishing trip in November 2012, but a sudden storm turned his small boat into a floating prison. With no land in sight, his only company was a fellow fisherman who, tragically, didn't make it. Starving and hopeless, José did the unthinkable. He started catching fish with his bare hands, eating them raw, bones and all. But it wasn't just fish. He snatched birds straight from the sky and even drank his own urine when rain wouldn't come. For over a year, he drifted across the vast Pacific, his mind slipping into hallucinations, his body withering away. And then one day, he spotted land, an island in the Marshall Islands. Crawling onto shore, he became the longest-known ocean castaway in history. But here's the real mystery. How did his boat manage to stay afloat for so long? Some believe it was pure luck. Others think something supernatural was watching over him. What do you think? Wait, please. Pay attention. Knowledge is power, and I'm giving it all to you. Now you really should subscribe. And yes, you must watch the full video too. Please. Let's resume number 8. The soldier who survived a plane crash, and then the ocean. In 1942, World War II pilot Eddie Rickenbacker boarded a plane, never knowing it would be the flight that would change his life forever. His aircraft crashed into the Pacific, leaving him and a few others stranded on flimsy life rafts with zero supplies. The sun blazed down on them, sharks circled beneath, and starvation set in. Then came day 8. When all hope seemed lost, something landed on his head. A seagull. The crew's hands shot up, catching the bird in a desperate, split-second move. They ate it raw, every last bite. But here's the kicker. They used its guts as bait to catch fish, securing their first real meal in days. 24 agonizing days later, they were rescued. But here's the eerie part. Rickenbacker always swore that seagull was a message from above, a divine intervention. Was it pure luck, or was something guiding him to survive? Number 7. The teenager who fought off sharks to survive. Being lost at sea is one thing. Being hunted while you're lost, that's an absolute nightmare. In 1961, 18-year-old Dougal Robertson and his family set off on what was supposed to be an idyllic sailing trip. But fate had a different plan. Their boat was attacked by a pod of killer whales. As their vessel sank, the family scrambled onto a life raft, only to find themselves stranded with no food or water. But the real horror? Sharks. At night, shadows circled their tiny raft, their fins slicing through the water. The family had no choice but to fight them off using paddles and bare hands. Yes, bare hands. With survival slipping away, they turned to the one thing they had left, sea turtles. They caught them, drank their blood, and ate them raw. 38 excruciating days later, a passing ship finally spotted them. Would you have the guts to fight a shark with your bare hands? Number 6. The diver who got swallowed by the ocean and spat back out. Chris Lemons was an experienced deep-sea diver, but nothing could prepare him for what happened in 2012. While working 300 feet beneath the surface, his oxygen line snapped. Suddenly, he was cut off, with only 5 minutes of emergency air. Here's where it gets terrifying. When his team found him 35 minutes later, he was still alive. That's right, he survived 30 extra minutes without oxygen. Science says that's impossible. But Chris Lemons defied science. Doctors couldn't explain it. Some say it was his diving suit that kept his body in a frozen-like state. Others whisper about supernatural intervention. But one thing's for sure. He is living proof that the ocean holds mysteries we still don't understand. Please subscribe. Because hitting your subscribe button can give me new motivation to work harder and succeed. Let me know if you're ready for the final 5 stories. They only get more shocking from here. Number 5. The fisherman who drank turtle blood. Imagine being stranded in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, with nothing but miles of endless water surrounding you. This was the terrifying reality for Tokai Te Toi, a fisherman from Kiribati. What started as a simple fishing trip turned into a nightmare of survival. After running out of food and fresh water, Te Toi was forced to drink turtle blood to stay alive. Dehydrated and weak, he watched helplessly as his companion died beside him. With no sign of rescue, sharks circled his tiny boat waiting for the inevitable. Just as he began to lose hope, a miracle happened. A massive storm appeared out of nowhere, pouring fresh rainwater into his boat. But the real shock, a random fishing boat, completely off its usual course, spotted his tiny vessel. The chances of survival? 1 in a million. Yet, somehow, he made it. Number 4. The man who fought off a shark. With his bare hands. Picture this. You're floating in open water, hungry, exhausted, and out of hope. Then, out of the depths, a monstrous shadow appears beneath you. This was Brett Archibald's horrifying reality. After falling off a tour boat in Indonesia, he spent 28 hours alone in shark-infested waters. He had no food, no water, and no rescue in sight. As hours passed, he began hallucinating, seeing ships that weren't there and hearing voices calling his name. Then a deadly shark approached. Desperate, Archibald punched it directly in the snout, sending it retreating for a brief moment. But his ordeal wasn't over. Jellyfish stings, searing heat, and brutal exhaustion tested his limits. Just as he began to sink beneath the waves, a miracle happened. A passing boat spotted his limp body floating in the water. His survival was nothing short of a modern-day miracle. Number 3. The castaway who lived on raw birds and fish for 438 days. 438 days. Let that sink in. Over a year, floating alone in the ocean, with no civilization in sight. This is the unbelievable story of Jose Salvador Alvarenga. He and a crewmate set out on a simple fishing trip, but when a storm struck, they were swept thousands of miles into the open ocean. His companion couldn't handle the mental torture and starvation, and eventually succumbed to hunger and exposure. Alvarenga was left completely alone, drifting helplessly. His only food? Raw fish, birds, and even the occasional sea turtle. His only water source? Rain, and sometimes his own urine. Days turned into weeks, then months. He watched as countless ships passed him by, too far to notice his desperate cries. But then, in a shocking twist, his tiny battered boat washed up on a remote island in the Pacific. Locals found him half dead, babbling in confusion. He had lost over 100 pounds but was miraculously alive. Number 2. The woman who clung to a capsized boat for 5 days. Debbie Kiley thought she was about to die. After setting sail on a routine yacht trip, a storm tore through the vessel, capsizing it in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. With no food, no water, and no shelter, she and her crewmates were at the mercy of the ocean. Then things got even worse. One by one, her crewmates started hallucinating. The brutal sun and dehydration drove them mad. 2 of them jumped into the ocean, convinced they could swim to safety, only to be torn apart by sharks. Kiley and one other survivor clung to the wreckage for 5 days, barely hanging on. Just when all hope was lost, a passing cargo ship spotted them and pulled them aboard. Kylie's tale remains one of the most chilling stories of survival at sea. Number 1. The man who survived 133 days in a life raft. If you think surviving a few weeks at sea is impossible, try 133 days. That's what Poon Lim endured when his ship was torpedoed during World War II. Stranded in a tiny raft in the middle of the Atlantic, he faced starvation, dehydration, and the constant terror of sharks. To survive, Lim crafted a makeshift fishing line using his shoelaces and caught fish with his bare hands. But when the fish ran out, he turned to more gruesome methods, catching and drinking the blood of seabirds to stay hydrated. As days turned to months, he drifted thousands of miles, growing weaker with each passing day. Just when it seemed like he wouldn't last another moment, a Brazilian fishing boat spotted his tiny raft bobbing in the waves. He was rescued, weighing just a fraction of his original size, but miraculously alive. Survival at sea is one of the most terrifying ordeals imaginable. These people face starvation, thirst, deadly predators, and sheer isolation, yet somehow they live to tell their tales. But what about you? Could you survive in the open ocean for weeks? Let us know in the comments below which survival story shocked you the most. And don't forget, please subscribe, because hitting your subscribe button can give me new motivation to work harder and succeed. Want more shocking survival stories? Drop your ideas in the comments, and we might cover them next.